Hello everyone, it is Jazz here and welcome to part 2 of my February wrap-up. So I decided to split up my wrap-up because I read 6 books if you missed part 1. And so these are the final 3 books that I read in February that I'm going to talk about today. Now these last 3 books blew my mind, so I'm really super excited to talk about them. Let's jump in. First up, we're going to talk about my reread of the book Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This book is set in a dystopian future, and the main character, Guy Montag, is a fireman. And in this future, firemen are people that basically go into people's houses and burn books because reading books is totally illegal. And that is his job, and he's just fine with it. But then he kind of meets this young girl who is his neighbor, and she is very imaginative and questioning, and it kind of causes him to question his reality and what he's doing with his life. So I had not read this book since middle school when I read it for assigned reading, and so it was really fun to read it again as an adult and just see what my thoughts are. Now this time around I did listen to it in audiobook, and it's a pretty enjoyable audiobook. It's read by Tim Robbins, that actor, and I think he did a pretty good job, so definitely an audiobook that I wouldn't mind recommending. In terms of the book, I love this book when I read it in middle school, and I still flipping love this book. Ray Bradbury's writing is just so flipping beautiful. I love his use of simile and metaphor and the way he brings in the themes of fire and flame. It's just so good in just terms of the actual writing, and I actually think that is the main reason people should read this book. Now the really awesome, fabulous thing about Fahrenheit 451, at least to me, is the ideas it expresses, how it makes you think. The book is about learning to think for yourself, and I think that is such an interesting thing because I think it's a very current idea. Now, I do kind of acknowledge that maybe in this book the characters are not characters that you necessarily can connect with or are necessarily super layered, but some of them are not supposed to be layered because they're kind of mindless drones of the system, so it kind of makes sense for them not to be layered. And the fact that some of the others aren't super layered really doesn't bother me. It's one of the few books where I say the character-ness doesn't matter so much because it's really 100% about the themes and the writing, in my opinion. I'm so pleased that I really still love this book and so excited about that. So I gave this book 5 stars. The next book that I completed was Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This is a story about a teenage girl named Asa, and her friend discover that there is a reward for finding this billionaire that has, been up to some crime named Russell Pickett. And it turns out that Asa was kind of childhood friends with Russell Pickett's son Davis, so her friend Daisy is you should totally go and chat with him and see what we can find out about this mystery. That is one of the elements of the plot, but another big element of this book is that Asa has OCD as well as some anxiety things that she is going through, kind of caused by the OCD, and how she kind of has these spiraling thoughts. So that kind of causes issues in her life and relationships. That's probably the main point of this book. I have to admit that I was kind of scared about whether I would like this book or not, because I did something that I never do, and I bought this book really not knowing that much about it, except for the fact that I really loved one John Green book, which was The Fault in Our Stars. So I thought, okay, I like this author, at least for one book. And also the fact that this book was pretty darn popular and pretty well loved by other people. Now, I almost never buy books for those 2 kind of reasons. So imagine my epic happiness when I ended up really loving this book. I still really love John Green's writing style. He really injects a lot of quirkiness into his writing as well as to his characters, but his characters are never so quirky that you can't relate to them. And the awesomeness about this book is that I really could relate to the characters. I have to commend the author for writing anxiety and any kind of things like OCD, and stuff like that really accurate and in a real way that kind of shows what it's like. Now, I don't have OCD necessarily, but I do have dyspraxia, which for me has caused some compulsive behavior as well as kind of some anxiety issues, and so I could really identify with the feelings that Asa was feeling and really relate to it, and I thought they were really well expressed. And I liked that a lot of this book was less about the mystery and more about, people trying to express the feelings of what it felt like to be them. Not just Asa, but some of the other characters in the book, and I thought that was a really, truly interesting thing. I also had to commend John Green for the sheer amount of research that was put into all, the scientific elements of this book, or any other kind of element that he chose to add into this book. It made everything sound just really accurate, and it actually added a lot to the characters and really showed what their passions were and what they cared about, which made me connect to them more. I also like that even though this is kind of quirky, it still had a sense of realism. Asa is dealing with something that she's always going to be dealing with, and I think the book really showed that in a way that was realistic, and I really appreciated that. This book was super awesome. I get why everybody loves it, and I loved it too, and I highly recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. The last book that I completed in February was the historical fiction Christie by Catherine Marshall. This is set in the year 1912, and it centers around a character named Christy, who at the age of 19 decides that she is going to join sort of a missionary group and go up into the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee and teach the children there who are, not very well educated. And the story is basically about kind of the trials and tribulations and the joys that come from going to this new place and learning about the culture of that place and figuring out how to educate the people there, and her experiences with the people that are also involved in this missionary endeavor. So I mostly read this book because my mom said that when she was younger, this was one of her super favorites. So I had to go ahead and give it a read, am I right? And I ended up super loving this book. First of all, this is another one where the writing style is just flipping beautiful. It is definitely a style that makes you really visualize the setting of where it is and makes the setting of the Smoky Mountains like almost a character. And I also really loved the development of the characters and how she really showed like the personalities and how they interacted with each other. Flipping love Christy. She is like the coolest character. She's definitely going on one of my favorite female characters list. I really like that she is definitely strong, but she still feels emotion, and also I really think that she is an excellent teacher, and I wish there were more teachers like Christy, because she really does kind of look at the individual and try to figure out how she can bring out the best in the individual. I also feel like she's a very analytical character who kind of like analyzes her thoughts and feelings and other people's thoughts and feelings, and there are other female characters in this that are kind of like that, and I think that's really super cool. Something kind of cool about this book that maybe somebody else might not think is cool, but I thought was cool, was that it really didn't include like any kind of romantic things in it until kind of the last maybe 200 pages or something of this 500-page book. And the reason why I kind of thought that was cool is because I really like the idea that Christy tried to actually find herself and figure out what her own life and like beliefs were about before she even thought about being with somebody else. And so I think that was a super interesting aspect to the book. I don't think a lot of books talk about that, and it's very rare that characters that are female do that. But I have to say, what I loved about this book the most is the way that it expresses Christianity and explores faith throughout the book. Now, while this isn't technically qualifying as like a Christian fiction, I would say that it discusses Christianity enough in it that it could be considered a Christian fiction. And as a Christian, I have found that it is really rare to find something that represents Christian life in a way that I really enjoy. Catherine Marshall approached Christianity in a way that, you know, put Christianity and my faith in a way that I actually didn't feel like people were misrepresenting it. In addition, I feel like a lot of things that are sort of Christian fiction-esque or in that gear do try to like almost in their way of trying to make things seem wholesome, kind of ignore the fact that, you know, the world has bad things going on in it. And this book doesn't do that. Like, it is deep. Like, deep stuff happens to these people. Bad stuff has happened to these people. There is a lot of emotional struggle, and this book isn't afraid to like include those things, but also wasn't afraid to discuss why those things happen. I think if you're a Christian, you definitely would enjoy reading this book. But also, I think even if you're not a Christian, you might want to check this out and see like kind of what the thought process is, because I think this represents that at best. And I know I got into like a religious moment here, and I'm sorry, but that was the thing that I loved about the book. Obviously, I really highly enjoyed this book. I found it so interesting because I live in Tennessee to read about something that is set in Tennessee. It's not exactly where I lived, but it's in my state, and think about what it might have been like in the past in the Smoky Mountains. That was kind of fun. So I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was awesome. Highly recommend. So that was part 2 of my February wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed this little thought-provoking discussion about these books, and I will be putting up my to be read for the Emoji-a-thon as well as the BookTube reread-a-thon soon, so definitely check that out when it goes up. So you can subscribe, click that little bell if you want to be notified, and also like this video if you like this video. And that is it for today, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all soon. Bye!